The state is at just above junk status in its credit rating. So there are not liabilities that can be adopted by the state that would not drive us into junk status. So that is not something that we can do. But again, we want to help municipalities in every way we can. We're looking at all the opportunities to do that, like improving investment returns.
Hi, I'm Terry Martin with the Online Channel.
Jeff Berkowitz, Public Affairs TV show.
And folks, we're coming back again for our weekly look at some of the big issues coming in. And this week we're looking at pensions discussion in Chicago. We're going to be taking a look at some of the new budget year that began on July 1, both in Capitol and some of the impact of money flowing again. And then we'll also take a look ahead at the 2020 congressional races as they firm up. But Jeff, first of all, you in Chicago have more tuned to what's going on there, and one of the issues I understand is what the mayor is trying to do relative to pensions.
Yeah, so the mayor got elected took over on May 20th. So she's been here, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, for about 51 days. And about a week ago, she took a look. Look, Brom left her a big surprise. Said there'd be a shortfall. It looks like the budget shortfall for this year is going to be about 800 million, maybe a little bit more. That's not good. Then she took a look at pensions, and she knows what we all knew. The Chicago pensions are terribly unfunded. I mean, it's basically, here's the headline, $70 billion hole, which we can explain. So she looked to the governor and said, she held out her hat and said, could you put something in there? And the governor said, well, you just heard him. He just said, we don't have anything. We're almost at junk status ourselves. We can't bail you out, but I'll try to help you in any way I can.
Well, and I want to say
and that's where it's left.
Yeah, that we'll see what they can do, but I frankly find it somewhat refreshing that the governor said, you know, we're on the edge of junk status and we can't take on any more debt. So Chicago is between a rock and a hard place. Let me bring this up. You could discuss it. And folks, if you don't know, Jeff has all but a PhD in economics. So we'll go to him and let him do the talk.
No matter how you slice it, these are Chicago. They have 4 retirement plans or funds. And if you aggregate them, you can see, taking a look different ways. In 2017, they were roughly 26% funded. Next year, it got worse, roughly 22 to 24% unfunded. These things depend on how well the market's doing, how much money you put in, etc. The point is, you can't handle this. You can't do it by taxes. You can't possibly raise taxes enough. You can't cut spending enough. All you can really do is cut pension benefits. So you need to amend the Constitution, and the mayor ran on the platform. She wouldn't do that. These are promises she made. So, you know, but if you want to look, it really, there are people who disagree, as you know, but in my view,
go ahead.
In my view, you cannot tax your way out of it. There's no way you could raise taxes enough, you'd never revolt, or cut spending enough. So on the state level, which we'll get to, on the city of Chicago, which is a second major problem for Illinois, those pensions, you have to amend the Constitution.
Don't they have like $1 billion? Isn't their pension bill going to go up something like $1 billion? Chicago's
right. It's now about 1.2 billion, and
annually.
And in 4 years. And in 4 years, it's scheduled statutorily to go up double that, okay? Another $1 billion. It'll be about 2.4 billion.
And so what they're doing, and let me put this in the context, folks. You just saw that their pensions went from roughly 25 to 23%, depending upon which way you're doing the accounting. Either way, none of those numbers show, no matter how you slice and dice it, that the Chicago pensions are anywhere near properly funded. And in the context of, as we sit here and tape this today, the Dow Jones just hit a record all-time high. The market is up. These pensions should be going up. They're going down from year to year. And what happens if we have a downturn in the economy? Right now, there's no way that Chicago can make its pension payments in the years ahead without something happening. I mean, that's the big picture. How they're going to fix it, I don't know.
So but look, it's not just me saying this. The former mayor for 8 years, Rahm Emanuel, hardly a radical, hardly a conservative, basically said you got to amend the Constitution. You're going to have to decrease pension benefits. There's no two ways about it. Rahm said that. He was there for 8 years. He should know. David Greising, who's a pillar of the establishment, is now head of the Better Government Association based in Chicago, BGA. He's written and says you have to amend the Constitution. He said, why doesn't the governor? We put on the ballot, the legislature put on the ballot the choice to people if they want to have a progressive income tax and tax wealthy much more than middle class people, they can do that. Why doesn't, he's basically said, why doesn't the governor come out and say, look, we can solve our Illinois problem. I don't want to do it, but it looks like we might have to by decreasing pension benefits. But folks, you decide.
Well,
let's amend the Constitution two ways.
Everyone,
How about
we have
that?
a constitution in Illinois that says you can't decrease the pension benefits. On the other hand, if you drain the pool of funds available, well, then that's it. I mean, you can have a pension guarantee, but if there's no money in the pool, there's no money in the pool. And, that's where we are.
But
so something's going to happen.
So his problem as governor, he's sort of wedded to the unions. They don't want to do this. So the question for Governor Pritzker, who's doing pretty well and had a big session legislatively and is very popular in town and across the state, does he want to use some of that popularity, some of that political capital to ask the legislature to put another amendment of the Constitution on the ballot in 2020 to allow the state and the city to decrease their pension benefits?
Let's jump ahead. That's people have known that pensions of Illinois are bad. They may or may not know about the Chicago pensions, which are horrible, and they're pretty much horrible across the board. But there is some good news this week, Jeff, and I understand at least, one way we can grow Illinois revenue to the government and help everybody, the city, the state, is if we can increase employment, bring more business back. And this week there was an increase in business, which is good to know, up in the Chicago area, right?
Right, and Terry's going to bring you good tidings because he is a man of good cheer and he's cheerful and optimistic. And, it's not all about, the thing about watching our show, folks, which I hope we do every week, it's not going to all be sadness and there's no hope. It's hope, growth, and opportunity when it's Terry Martin.
So we had Accenture, which is already operating in Chicago, but I understand they're going to expand their operations. The governor spoke at this event. Let's take a listen.
Excels in the pillars of the innovation economy. We have some of the best research universities in the world. We're producing the second largest number of computer science graduates in the entire nation and the fourth largest number of MBAs in the nation. Our startup hubs, 1871 and Matter and M-Hub and TechNexus and Blue 1647 and many more have cemented the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois as global leaders in innovation and technology. And in expanding its own innovation hub and adding 600 more tech-specific jobs, Accenture is contributing to our momentum and capitalizing on a tremendous opportunity. That's an economic investment that in itself is great for their company, for Accenture, and great for our city and our state.
Well, that was a stirring talk, and seriously, it was. They're renaming what's known in Chicago. If you folks from downstate come to the Loop, one of the main train stations here is the Metro Station, also known as 500 West Madison, also known as Ogilvy. Someday we'll talk about the famous name Ogilvy, but not today. But in any case, so he was speaking because Accenture basically got the naming rights to that building. It'll be known as Accenture Consulting Center.
Now, what is
or Accenture Center.
Accenture, what do they do?
It's like they are a major global consulting firm. It started when Arthur Anderson ran into bad times. A lot of those folks, Anderson was an accounting firm, major accounting firm, but it was a major consulting firm. So Accenture was the spinoff of the consulting side, and it's just huge across the world. And in fact, they're Ireland-based, probably for, obvious tax reasons to have headquarters there. And I don't even think they have a U.S. headquarters,
Well,
but Chicago is one of their major offices.
Accenture. That's why they're a consulting
Okay.
firm is the point. And one thing I would bring
Well,
up is
yes.
when we were just talking about the depth of the problem of Illinois pensions or Chicago pensions, Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, brought up maybe we should start taxing services. So we could tax people like Accenture on consulting, like lawyers, these people that provide services. Maybe you're a dentist, you go into your doctor. These are all economic transactions within the economy, Lori Lightfoot would argue. And why are we just taxing people that sell goods and not those that tax those that provide services? I will say that just yesterday in the Illinois CPA Society came out against that proposal, although it's also something that, our friend Ralph Martiri, who's a political consultant to certain people. The governor, I think, listens to some of what he has to say. Ralph Martiri has been arguing for years that the state ought to be taxing services to broaden the base of revenue.
Yeah, my good friend Ralph, as I say, Ralph never met a tax hike he didn't like. And so, that's his bias. He's very tied to the unions.
But Jeff,
Unions
let's say,
often want to raise taxes.
I used to be in the printing business back in an earlier life in St. Louis. Why should I have to collect a tax doing an economic transaction in the economy? And a lawyer that you have a law degree. Why shouldn't a lawyer have to collect a tax? Why do they get off on their services? But when I'm doing my economic transaction, I got to collect a tax. Why is that fair?
Right. If you were starting from scratch, you would tax goods and services the same. But as you know, Terry, long ago when the state started and we started our taxes, services were a relatively small part of the economy. Goods were, so we didn't bother with services.
What time do we update this?
Well, maybe, but as you know, the anti-side to the people, and there are people who oppose this, saying that's fine, but you're just going to have that's an increase in total taxes. So we're just talking about Accenture expanding here. The more you raise tax, and Lori Lightfoot made clear, she doesn't want to tax all services. She doesn't want to tax tanning. She doesn't want to tax your dog walker. So she's talking just the major firms. That would be law firms, accounting firms, consulting firms.
I think, and I forgot who I said, whether it's haircuts, I think what could happen if it was negotiated properly is you recognize the new economy. We are no longer a blue collar manufacturing economy predominantly, as we might have been in the 40s and 50s. Now, so many of us are paper pushers, we're service providers, or you're cutting your lawns, you're getting your haircuts. There's some that will repay on these property taxes, they're outrageous. Other people collect no taxes. Maybe we could do a swap out. That's the big thing. I would say to this people, it's not what I think or Jeff thinks, but this is a conversation that is going to be coming down the pike, and we're trying to give you a peek into the future. Now, that said, one of the arguments is going to be if you start raising taxes on everything, that's regressive. The poor people, every time they go to get a haircut or anything else, they're going to have to pay a tax, and that's regressive. I want to replay. Let's transition, Jeff. July 1 began the FY20 budget for the state. We got a capital bill. Finally we got a budget passed on time. It's the biggest budget in history. But when we interviewed Jeannie Ives recently, she brought up some of the new taxes and spoke to us about how regressive those are.
The state is just drowning in debt, and they added more debt. And also the capital bill, I mean, it's going to be paid with massive tax increases. And so the biggest one, of course, is the gas tax, which is a regressive tax. It hurts the poor and the middle class the most because gas is universal. People have to drive places. And at the same time, the Democrats want a progressive tax where you tax the rich more. They passed a massive gas tax, doubling it all in 1 year. So
I think everybody knows we just doubled our gas tax.
Yeah, so there's your answer, Terry. Look, the little guy's not going to get hit by this. If Lori Lightfoot has anything to say about it, she's just talking the major business providers. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but this regressive aspect goes away to a large extent if you were to restrict the increase and or the new tax to law firms, especially if you had large law firms, large accounting firms, consulting firms. And that's where a lot of the money is. So that's number one. But you said, why not do it? Well, maybe you want to look around and say, what are our competitors? If we're trying to get law firms to be based in Chicago, what does Los Angeles do? What does New York do? What does San Francisco do? Because if they don't tax these law firms and accounting firms and consulting firms, it puts us at a competitive disadvantage.
Not necessarily.
So
if we can spread the base of tax so that everyone pays a little bit, then maybe we can get a lowering of the property taxes that many say is the real cancer on the Illinois economy. These property taxes are also a killer on business. And I think a lot of these businesses would be happy to probably say, take my property tax away that is not based upon me doing any sales. That's just on property sitting there. Homeowners would say that too. It's not based upon your ability to pay. Lower my property taxes. I'll pay maybe a swap out. I mean, that's going to be the argument we have to have.
yeah, well, the problem is that we don't have a unified government here. We have state government, we have local government, we have the federal side, federalism, okay? So the people who decide your property taxes are different from the people deciding, well, your people who decide your property taxes may be different from the people deciding, say, the state income tax. They also are to some extent different from the people deciding your county taxes and so forth. So you're saying, well, the mayor, we're getting confused here, perhaps our viewers might, because we're talking at once about state issues. We're also talking about city of Chicago issues.
Well, the city's
we're also talking about people somewhere in between.
But others have, like I said, like Martiri is saying, we should be doing this in the state, that we still tax as if it's 1950 when it's 2019, and that the modern
Okay, but
economy is no longer based on manufacturing.
Okay, but if that's the proposal, that we should tax, say, major firm, law firm, accounting
Major
firm,
firms,
consulting
all
firm,
services. It could
services.
be a gas station. I mean, not gas. It could be
Okay.
a bar.
So you want to do that,
bar.
okay? Yeah, you want to,
Could be
okay.
the
So
guy
you
that
want,
comes
the
in
problem with
cuts
that,
your lawn, you know.
bring in the regressive aspect of that, because the payers there are low income or middle income. So that's one. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it.
That's why
but
we just had what Jeannie Ives just told us in a recent interview. Let me,
Right.
because I want to get to some other things on this overall topic. Sometimes we think it's just Democrats wanting to raise taxes on everything and the Republicans are fighting. That there is some generally truth to that. But recently we had Representative Mike Murphy, a Republican House member who's a freshman, been in the legislature for 6 months now. He just spoke recently about his vote for the state budget. Let's listen to why he said he would vote for that.
Caucus for 4 hours the last day of session, because we were trying to get some business reforms through, and they were not receptive. Our leader Durkin, I'm very proud of him. He kept on going back and forth to us, telling us, guys, hang loose. I'm working. The governor finally came in and got involved in negotiations, and we got 6 key business issues. I won't go through them today, but there were 6 key issues that were near and dear to my heart, because if you remember at the beginning of my speech, why did I run, was to improve the business climate. So when we got these 6 issues, they said that they expected Republican participation on the budget. And that's just the way the system works. I stood up and I said, I will be one of those votes, because the reason I ran was to improve the business climate, and today's the first day I've had an opportunity to do that. And so I knew there were some things in the budget that was going to cause me angst, but I knew at the end of the day, if I really was going to do what I came to do, I had to be a yes vote. And so I am a yes vote. I don't apologize for that. There's some things in the budget I wish we would change, but that's not reality.
So there you go. We had a Republican House member voting for the budget because on one hand, we got these 6 business reforms. So he would say kudos to House Leader Jim Durkin. And the other thing is also, which I think we want to point out from that bite, he said the Democrats weren't going to go for it, but then Governor Pritzker came in and negotiated a deal and said, yes, we'll give you those things you want if you put votes on the budget. So this is what a lot of people said was missing in the Round administration. There was no horse trading. Here we're having horse trading, and as a result, we got a capital bill, we got a state budget. Money is flowing back again, for better or for worse, Jeff. And I will just also add, Representative Murphy is from the Springfield area, and in the capital bill, the city, or Sangamon County, where Springfield is going to get over $1 billion in capital improvements just in the Springfield area.
Well, the flip side of that, of how wonderful it was that they got these business reforms, I don't think anybody can name any of the business reforms. They're not major. Somebody like Dan Croft or Representative Skillicorn would say that those are just table scraps. They did virtually nothing, so the Republicans gave up a lot for very little. That's the short answer to that. So maybe you like compromise, maybe you think that's wonderful. Taxes are going up, they're not going down. Growth in Illinois is down, not up. I don't see that as a long-run solution. Illinois is soon the 6th most popular state. If we want to be the 10th, we can go in that direction. As I say, Terry, the question for people to ask with every major proposal, do you want to have growth, hope, and opportunity, or do you want to be a declining state?
Well, you also want to have
That's
a
the question.
functional state, and we were a non-functional state, and we did, people would argue, have a systemic deficit that has to be addressed. Now, the governor's trying to pass a constitutional amendment so he can have a progressive income tax. I don't know if that's the way the state wants to go. That's something the voters, need to focus on. They're going to be the determining factor, the voters in November of 2020, as to whether we want to say no more flat tax, 4.95% on income. The governor says we need to have a progressive income tax. You get arguments across the board on that one.
Well, we may have a chart on that. Don't we have a chart?
We do have a chart. Let me see if I can bring up just to go over
Okay.
that.
There we go. It's a little hard to see. Maybe we can get it darker, possibly. I don't know. The main point of that chart is the big difference in terms of income is when you go from less than 250,000 to more than 250,000. That's the general dividing line. We don't need the details. So the progressive income tax will start pushing people toward that 8% level with some caveats once your income is above 250,000. And if it's below, you're at that 5% level. If you're less than 50,000, you might be at 0. So the main point of the chart, you just said we have a deficit, but is the deficit ever cured by having reforms to be more efficient and cut costs and cut spending, or is it all about increased revenue? If there's any criticism of the governor, maybe where are the reforms? Where are the efficiencies? We just seem to be increasing taxes and revenue. And the Republicans just went along with a major tax increase. So who will be the voice in opposition to higher taxes? Jeannie Ives? Possibly.
Well, it's an open question, and also some in the business community, one would think. Here's the thing. We're trying to give the viewers both where we are now, where we've been, how today compares with the past, and then some insight in the future. We're going to take a quick look into the future in a little bit. But first of all, one of the things that happened a couple of years ago, back July the 6th of 2017, the Republicans voted with the Democrats to override Governor Rauner's third veto in a row of the budget, because some of the schools at that point said, we have a number of our schools that don't have enough money to get past September. There was millions of dollars that were owed to local schools. Just the other day, I had a chance to sit and talk with Dr. Tom Bertrand, the new head of the Illinois Association of School Boards, who has his finger on school districts across the state. And he said there's $375 million now in new funding for our schools, and that's an increase. But, the downside was that they also came saddled with some mandates on the schools. Let's take a listen.
On the downside, as we touched on, you had mandates. So two of them was, one, the $40,000 a year minimum payment for teachers, which people in Chicago would say, what's the big deal? We pay more than that now, but that's not certainly true around the state. The other mandate was that impacts everyone. $15 an hour minimum wage, people probably tend to think of that just as being business, but it impacts schools as well.
Absolutely. In fact, the $15 minimum wage might have more of an impact on schools than the $40,000 minimum teacher's salary, both of which will be phased in. But one of the concerns that we had, in addition to the fact that those kinds of decisions about compensation and benefits for employees are best made by locally elected school board members who represent the taxpayers in that community. In addition to that, our concern was that these two mandates could swallow up a lot of the new resources that schools will be getting.
Jeff, so mandates, and interesting that the $15 an hour minimum wage, which is going to be reached in 2025 under current law, Tom Bertrand says that, surprisingly to me, could have a bigger impact on schools than even setting a minimum wage of $40,000 for teachers.
Okay.
Let's take a look forward to some of our congressional races. We only have about 2 minutes left here. But one of the most competitive races, Jeff, up in your neck of the woods, and this flipped, was the race between Lauren Underwood, a freshman Democrat, and she's going to be challenged.
Yeah, okay. So she beat Randy Holcomb last time around. Close race, 4-point spread. What was that, about 15,000 votes? Yeah, it was a big surprise. A lot of people say Holcomb just wasn't seen. He wasn't in the district enough. And so, as we'll see, we'll take a look at the Republicans. There we go. We got 6 Republicans announced running in the Republican primary to take on Lauren Underwood. And Sue Resin just announced recently. She's a state senator, as is Jim Oberweis, and then 4 others who are perhaps a little less well-known. Maybe they'll become more well-known by the time of the March 2020 election. And, what various people said, this is a Republican seat. Somehow it just fell through the cracks, they think, and so it's a very winnable seat. You're showing now the 6th, which was a long-standing Republican seat. And Peter Roskam had held that for 12 years. And before him, Henry Hyde. Sean Casten pulled that away by a good margin. And that might be tougher for the Republicans to win back. Evelyn Sanguinetti, the former lieutenant governor under Rauner, I think, is an announced candidate. And the other possible candidate, who you and I know, but I don't think she's announced yet, would be Jeannie Ives. What do you know about that, Terry?
When I interviewed Ginny Ives recently, we didn't discuss that directly. I would say that she has been asked by many people to take a look at that, and I think she is taking a look at that, as are some others, obviously. These will be the races to watch, these ones north. And then there's one other one, the 13th down in the district in central Illinois, where Rodney Davis only won by 2,000 votes. So most of these congressional seats are hard to flip, but those are 3 that we might want to take a look at. Jeff, sadly, we'll have to spend some more time going forward, but sadly, we're already at the end of another edition. Always too many things to talk about, not enough time.
Fastest half hour on TV, right?
Fastest half hour on TV, exactly so. And ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you watching. Please leave a comment, if you would, down below on our YouTube channel. And Jeff, we'll see you next week.
See you, Terry.